Hello and welcome back to Deep Dives with SmartBookWorms. I'm Martina, your virtual book guru host for today's show. Join me, Amanda, Claire, Megan, Nathan, and Chris Stouffer, my co-presenters and fellow virtual book gurus, as we dive deep into 5 incredible books by 5 iconic authors. Join us as we dive into the scariest horror novel ever written and see if we can make it through without losing our mind. Horror novels have a way of getting under our skin, making our hearts race, and pushing our imaginations to the darkest corners of our minds. They're a staple of many book lovers' reading lists, and for good reason. There's something about immersing ourselves in fear that's both thrilling and cathartic. But have you ever wondered, what's the most terrifying horror novel of all time? Fear is a highly subjective experience, and what sends shivers down one person's spine might barely raise an eyebrow on another. This makes identifying a single scariest novel a daunting task, especially when you consider the sheer volume of incredible horror writers out there. From classic masters like Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft, to modern maestros like Stephen King and Clive Barker, the horror genre is saturated with talented storytellers who know exactly how to push our buttons. Add to that the fact that fear is deeply personal, and what terrifies one person might be laughable to another. I know people who are terrified of spiders, while others think they're cute. It's the same with horror novels. What scares one reader might not even make another one flinch. So, how do we even begin to determine the most terrifying horror novel of all time? One thing's for sure, it can't be done solely based on popularity or sales figures. Just because a book is a bestseller doesn't mean it's inherently scary. Nor can it be done based on the number of jump scares or gore factor. No, to find the most terrifying horror novel, we need to dig deeper, to explore the themes, the atmosphere, and the psychological impact of each book. Let's take a journey through some of the most iconic horror novels of all time. From The Exorcist to The Shining, from Dracula to the Amityville Horror, each of these classics has its own unique brand of terror that's left readers sleeping with the lights on for decades. In The Turn of the Screw, Henry James masterfully crafts an atmosphere of creeping dread that's almost palpable, while Richard Matheson's I Am Legend redefines the concept of loneliness and isolation. In The Haunting of Hill House, Shirley Jackson creates a sense of unease that's both subtle and overwhelming, while The Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris is a masterclass in psychological manipulation. And then, of course, there's The Ring by Koji Suzuki, which takes the concept of cursed objects to a whole new level. Each of these novels has its own unique flavor of terror, but which one reigns supreme? So let's take a look at the 5 contenders we have for you today. John Langan's The Fisherman, a slow-burn tale of grief and supernatural encounters. Richard Matheson's Hell House, a suspenseful investigation into a haunted mansion. Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, a psychological horror story exploring themes of isolation and identity. Stephen King's The Shining, a chilling narrative of a family's descent into madness in a haunted hotel. And William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist, a gripping account of demonic possession and the struggle for a young girl's soul. Over to Amanda for our first insight.
Book 1, The Fisherman, John Langan. John Langan is an American author and writer of contemporary horror. Langan has been a finalist for International Horror Guild Award. In 2008, he was a Bram Stoker Award nominee for Best Collection, and in 2016, a Bram Stoker Award winner for his novel, The Fisherman. John Langan's The Fisherman is a horror novel praised for its masterful blend of melancholy and intense dread. Reviewers highlight the story's exploration of themes of friendship and loss, emphasizing the lasting impact of profound horror. The novel follows a narrator's journey of grief and healing through fishing, which unexpectedly leads him and his friend Dan into a terrifying confrontation with supernatural entities. The narrative unfolds through interwoven stories, including that of Lottie Schmidt and her family, revealing a larger, interconnected narrative of mysterious events and terrifying creatures. The book culminates in a chilling climax that tests the limits of human resilience. Review of The Fisherman by John Langan. John Langan's The Fisherman is a masterpiece of modern horror, a haunting and evocative tale that will stay with you long after you finish reading. It is a story about loss, grief, and the dangerous allure of the unknown. The novel is structured as a frame story, with the narrator recounting a terrifying experience he shared with his friend Dan. The two men, both widowers, bond over their shared love of fishing. They embark on a fishing trip to Dutchman's Creek in the Catskill Mountains, a place rumored to hold dark secrets. Before their trip, they meet a man named Howard in a diner, who shares a strange and disturbing legend about the area. The story is full of unsettling details about a mysterious figure known as the Fisherman, who seeks to control powerful forces through dark rituals. Howard's story foreshadows the horrifying events that unfold for the narrator and Dan. One of the novel's strengths is its slow-burn approach to horror. Langan takes his time building atmosphere and suspense, drawing the reader into the world of the story before unleashing its full terror. The novel is filled with a sense of creeping dread that gradually intensifies as the story progresses. The characters are well developed and relatable, even as they are drawn into increasingly strange and disturbing circumstances. The narrator is a thoughtful and introspective man struggling to cope with the loss of his wife. He finds solace in fishing, but his grief continues to haunt him. Dan is a more impulsive and reckless character, driven by a desire to escape his pain. The dynamic between the two men is complex and believable, adding an emotional depth to the story. Langan's prose is lyrical and evocative, creating a vivid and immersive reading experience. He captures the beauty and serenity of the natural world, even as he imbues it with a sense of menace and foreboding. The descriptions of the Catskill Mountains and the dark waters of Dutchman's Creek are particularly effective. The novel's exploration of grief and loss is both powerful and moving. Both the narrator and Dan are haunted by the deaths of their wives, and their grief manifests itself in different ways. Langan's portrayal of grief is nuanced and realistic, capturing the complexity of this universal human experience. The Fisherman is a challenging and rewarding read that will appeal to fans of literary horror and anyone who enjoys a well-crafted and thought-provoking story. Here are some of the novel's key strengths. Masterful storytelling. Langan weaves together multiple storylines and perspectives, creating a rich and complex narrative. Slow-burn horror. The novel builds suspense gradually, culminating in a truly terrifying climax. Well-developed characters. The characters are relatable and complex, driven by believable motivations. Lyrical and evocative prose. Langan's writing is beautiful and immersive, drawing the reader into the world of the story. Exploration of grief and loss. The novel offers a powerful and moving meditation on these universal human experiences. The Fisherman is a must-read for fans of horror and dark fiction. It is a novel that will stay with you long after you finish reading, leaving you with a lingering sense of unease and wonder. Highly recommended. Book highlights. Story within a story. The novel follows Abe, a widower who finds solace in fishing, and his co-worker Dan, who suffers an even greater loss. Their shared grief leads them to a fishing trip and an encounter with Howard, who tells a multi-generational tale about a mysterious figure known as the Fisherman. Themes of grief and the supernatural. The novel explores how grief can make individuals vulnerable to the allure of the impossible, blurring the lines between reality and the supernatural. The Fisherman represents a dark entity that preys on these vulnerabilities. Exploration of human nature. The story delves into the complexities of human emotion, highlighting how grief, desire, and the pursuit of knowledge can lead to both healing and destruction. Characters like Abe, Dan, and Rainer embody different responses to loss and the unknown. Symbolism and setting. Everyday objects like fishing hooks and the diner, as well as the reservoir itself, become imbued with symbolic meaning, representing the intrusion of the supernatural into the mundane. The setting of the Catskills and Dutchman's Creek further emphasizes the hidden depths and unsettling nature of the story. Hope and acceptance. Despite the darkness and horror, the novel offers a glimmer of hope through Abe's eventual healing and connection with Sadi. This suggests that even in the face of immense loss, acceptance and connection can lead to renewal.
Book 2, Hell House, Richard Matheson. Richard Burton. Matheson was an American author and screenwriter, primarily in the fantasy, horror, and science fiction genres. He is best known as the author of I Am Legend, a 1954 science fiction horror novel that has been adapted for the screen 3 times. Richard Matheson's Hell House is a suspenseful novel excerpt detailing a parapsychologist's investigation into a notoriously haunted mansion. A physicist, Barrett, is hired by Deutsch to determine if the house's supernatural reputation is factual, offering a substantial sum for a definitive answer. Barrett, along with a medium, Florence Tanner, and a skeptical former medium, Fisher, investigates the house's phenomena, encountering terrifying events and uncovering the dark history of its creator, Belasco. The narrative explores the interplay between science and the supernatural, as Barrett attempts to find a rational explanation while confronting inexplicable occurrences. Ultimately, the story questions the nature of reality and the limits of human perception. Hell House? A review. Richard Matheson's Hell House is a masterfully crafted masterpiece of horror that will leave you breathless, terrified, and questioning the very nature of reality itself. This book is not for the faint of heart. It's a chilling exploration of the darkest corners of the human psyche and the terrifying possibilities of the supernatural. The story centers around the infamous Belasco House, a sprawling mansion in Maine with a sinister reputation as the most haunted house in the world. Lionel Barrett, a brilliant physicist and parapsychologist, is offered a hefty sum by the dying millionaire William Reinhard Deutsch to investigate the house and definitively prove or disprove the existence of life after death. Barrett assembles a team consisting of himself, his wife Edith, the medium Florence Tanner, and the physically gifted but emotionally scarred Ben Fisher, a man haunted by his own past encounter with Hell House. Matheson wastes no time in establishing a palpable atmosphere of dread and suspense. From the moment the characters arrive at the Belasco house, you are thrust into a world where the boundaries between the real and the supernatural blur, leaving you constantly questioning what is true and what is a product of the house's insidious influence. The descriptions of the house are vivid and unsettling, painting a picture of a decaying mansion filled with dark secrets and a malevolent presence. The characters are well developed and relatable, each with their own motivations and vulnerabilities. Barrett, driven by his scientific curiosity and the desire to prove his theories, is forced to confront the limitations of his rational worldview. Edith, a devout Christian, struggles to reconcile her faith with the terrifying events unfolding around her. Florence, the spiritual medium, is consumed by her desire to connect with the spirits and unravel the mysteries of the house, ultimately putting her own life at risk. Fisher, still traumatized by his previous experience, grapples with his own psychic abilities and the fear of succumbing to the house's power once again. The novel's strength lies not only in its terrifying atmosphere and compelling characters, but also in its masterful pacing and relentless suspense. Matheson expertly builds tension through a series of increasingly disturbing events, each one chipping away at the character's sanity and resolve. The house, with its ever-shifting nature and unpredictable phenomena, becomes a character in itself, a malevolent entity determined to destroy those who dare to enter its domain. Matheson's writing is sharp and evocative, immersing you in the story and leaving you feeling like you are right there in the heart of the Belasco house. experiencing the terror firsthand. He skillfully blends psychological horror with the supernatural, blurring the lines between the two and leaving the reader questioning the source of the house's power. The book is a masterclass in ambiguity, leaving the reader to draw their own conclusions about the nature of the events that unfold. Hell House is a thought-provoking and disturbing novel that will stay with you long after you finish the last page. It's a chilling reminder of the fragility of the human mind and the terrifying power of the unknown. This is a must-read for fans of horror and anyone who enjoys a good scare. Here are some of the key highlights of the book. Compelling characters. Each character is richly developed, with their own strengths, weaknesses, and motivations, adding depth and complexity to the story. Atmosphere of dread. Matheson creates a palpable sense of fear and unease, drawing the reader into the chilling world of the Belasco house. Relentless suspense. The story is expertly paced, with a series of escalating events that keep the reader on the edge of their seat. Thought-provoking themes. The novel explores complex themes such as the nature of reality, the limits of human understanding, and the power of belief. Masterful writing. Matheson's prose is sharp, evocative, and immersive, making the story all the more terrifying and memorable. Hell House is a true classic of the horror genre and a testament to Richard Matheson's talent as a storyteller. It's a book that will stay with you long after you've finished reading it, leaving you questioning the very nature of reality itself. If you're looking for a book that will scare you to your core, look no further than Hell House. Book highlights. Scientific investigation of the supernatural. A team investigates the notoriously haunted Hell House, including a skeptical physicist, parapsychologist, his grounded wife, a mental medium, and a physical medium with prior experience at the house. Hell House's dark history. The house's original owner, Emmerich Belasco, was a depraved individual who engaged in various dark practices. The house is believed to be saturated with this negative energy, further complicated by the mysterious death of his son, Daniel. Clashing approaches. The investigation involves a clash between scientific methods and intuitive, empathetic connection with the supernatural, highlighting different ways of approaching the unknown. This creates tension and raises ethical questions about exploiting the medium's abilities. Belasco's master plan. The haunting is ultimately revealed to be orchestrated by Belasco himself, who planned his death to amplify his residual energy and control the house from beyond the grave. He manipulates the investigators and feeds off their fear. Defiance as a weapon. Despite Belasco's power, he is defeated not by technology, but by Fisher's defiance. By refusing to be controlled by fear and denying Belasco's perceived power, Fisher breaks his hold on the house. The story leaves a lingering question about the true nature of the house and the potential for evil.
Book 3, The Haunting of Hill House, Shirley Jackson. Shirley Hardy Jackson was an American writer known primarily for her works of horror and mystery. Her writing career spanned over 2 decades, during which she composed 6 novels, 2 memoirs, and more than 200 short stories. The excerpts from an edition of Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, including an introduction that explores the history and evolution of the horror genre, focusing on authors like Poe and James. The introduction also discusses Jackson's life and how her personal experiences informed her writing, particularly her portrayal of female characters and their complex relationships. The provided excerpts from the novel itself depict a group of individuals investigating Hill House, a supposedly haunted mansion, and their psychological responses to its unsettling atmosphere. The narrative highlights the blurring lines between reality and perception, internal and external conflicts, and the pervasive theme of loneliness. The introduction also briefly profiles Ray Russell, another horror writer. The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson is one of those books that gets under your skin and stays there. If you love psychological horror with a touch of the uncanny, this one's for you. First published in 1959, this novel is a classic for a reason. It follows four characters who come together at Hill House, a creepy old mansion with a bad reputation, to investigate its supposed haunting. We've got Dr. John Montague, a paranormal scholar who's determined to prove ghosts are real. Eleanor Vance, our main character, who's shy, lonely, and has a history of psychic experiences. Theodora, a quirky, artistic type with a mysterious vibe. Luke Sanderson, the heir to Hill House, who's charming but a bit of a skeptic. Right from the start, you feel that Hill House is off. It's not just the crooked doors and eerie silence. It's the atmosphere Shirley Jackson creates. The house itself feels alive, like it's watching, waiting, and ready to pull its visitors into its sinister embrace. What really sets this book apart is how much of the story is told through Eleanor's eyes. And here's the kicker. Eleanor's mind isn't exactly reliable. As things start getting weird in the house, knocks on the walls, cold spots, strange writings, we're left wondering, is the house haunted? Or is it Eleanor's mind unraveling? Jackson doesn't hand us the answers on a silver platter, and that's what makes this story so creepy. It's all about the ambiguity. You're constantly questioning, is this supernatural or is it psychological? Eleanor's journey is heartbreaking and relatable in its own way. She's desperate for belonging, carrying the weight of a rough childhood and an overbearing mother. When she arrives at Hill House, she sees it as an escape. But instead of finding refuge, the house becomes this mirror, reflecting her fears and insecurities. And speaking of mirrors, the relationships in this book are fascinating. Eleanor and Theodora's dynamic is a mix of friendship, rivalry, and tension. Dr. Montague is so focused on proving ghosts are real that he misses what's happening to Eleanor. And Luke? Well, he's kind of along for the ride but gets pulled in deeper as the story unfolds. What makes this book unforgettable is Jackson's writing. She creates an atmosphere of quiet dread that sneaks up on you. It's not about jump scares. It's about that slow, creeping horror that makes you want to sleep with the lights on. Oh, and if you're into classics like The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, you'll love this one. Jackson's work shares that same sense of psychological depth and ambiguity. Even Guillermo del Toro, yes, the guy behind Pan's Labyrinth, calls The Haunting of Hill House a masterpiece, praising how it blends the supernatural with the psychological. Why you should read it? It's not just a ghost story, it's a deep dive into the human psyche. The house itself is practically a character, and it's terrifying. Eleanor's perspective keeps you guessing. What's real and what's in her head? It's creepy in the best way, with themes of isolation, identity, and belonging. If you haven't read The Haunting of Hill House, add it to your list ASAP. It's the kind of book that lingers, making you think about its characters, its twists, and that eerie, unforgettable house long after you've turned the last page. What do you think? Is Hill House haunted? Or is it all in Eleanor's mind? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your theories.
Book 4, The Shining by Stephen King. Let's talk about The Shining, Stephen King's unforgettable horror classic. This one is the ultimate keep the lights on book, and for good reason. If you're into tales of isolation, madness, and supernatural spookiness, this is the story for you. Here's the gist. The Torrance family, Jack, Wendy, and their young son Danny, heads to the Overlook Hotel, a massive, creepy resort nestled in the Colorado mountains. Jack's there to be the winter caretaker, keep the place running during the off-season, and hopefully finish his big writing project. Sounds cozy, right? Except the Overlook has secrets, big ones, and let's just say by the time the snow traps them there, it's not just the weather that's dangerous. Why The Shining is a must-read. First, let's talk about the hotel. The Overlook isn't just a building, it's practically alive. This place has its own personality. And spoiler, it's not a nice one. It watches, manipulates, and outright feeds on the Torrance family's fears and weaknesses. Between the eerie topiary animals, the creepy Room 237, and the grand ballroom that seems way too lively for an abandoned hotel, the Overlook is terrifying. Then there's Jack Torrance. Jack's story is a tragic one. He's a guy with big dreams but a messy past, alcoholism, anger issues, and a lot of regret. At first, you root for him. You want him to get it together. But as the Overlook sinks its claws into him, Jack spirals into madness. Watching him unravel is heartbreaking and horrifying all at once. Danny is the heart of the story. Danny, the Torrance's young son, has the shining, a psychic ability that lets him see the hotel's darkest secrets. And, wow, does this kid go through a lot. His visions are disturbing, but his bravery is inspiring. You can't help but cheer him on as he fights to protect himself and his family. And Wendy? What a fighter. Wendy often gets overlooked, pun intended, in conversations about this book, but she's incredible. She's strong, resourceful, and determined to keep her family safe, even when Jack becomes a threat. Her courage in the face of absolute chaos is one of the highlights of the story. What makes The Shining special? Isolation and madness. The Overlook traps the Torrances physically and mentally, turning their small family into a powder keg. Themes that hit hard. The book dives into addiction, abuse, and the fragility of the human mind. It's scary because it feels real. Mystery. What exactly is the Overlook? Is it haunted evil? A manifestation of people's worst impulses? King doesn't spell it out, and that ambiguity makes it all the more terrifying. Final thoughts. The Shining isn't just a horror story, it's a masterclass in storytelling. Stephen King blends psychological tension with supernatural horror in a way that sticks with you long after you've turned the last page. Whether you're a horror fan or just love a gripping, emotional story, this book is a must-read. What's your favorite moment from The Shining? The topiary animals, room 237, Jack's chilling his Johnny moment? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what gave you goosebumps.
Book 5, The Exorcist, William Peter Blatty. Let's talk about The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. Okay, book lovers, today we're diving into one of the scariest and most iconic horror novels ever written, The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. If you haven't read it yet, prepare yourself. This book isn't just a spooky story, it's a deep, chilling dive into faith, doubt, and the battle between good and evil. So, what's the story? At its core, The Exorcist is about Regan McNeil, a sweet 12-year-old girl who suddenly starts behaving, well, terrifyingly. Think foul language, unexplained strength, and yes, full-on levitation. Her mum, Chris, who, by the way, is a famous actress, is at her wit's end trying to figure out what's happening. After exhausting all the medical and psychiatric options, she turns to the church for help, leading to the arrival of Father Damien Karras, a Jesuit psychiatrist with his own baggage, and Father Merrin, an experienced exorcist who's faced demons before. Now, the way Blatty tells this story is pure genius. He starts slow, dropping eerie little breadcrumbs that hint at something being off. There's this unforgettable prologue set in Iraq, where Father Merrin senses an ancient evil stirring. Meanwhile, back in Georgetown, Chris is busy working on a film when Regan's strange behavior begins. At first, it's just unsettling. A little bedwetting, some odd language, but things quickly escalate to full-blown supernatural chaos. What makes The Exorcist so memorable? The characters feel real. Chris isn't just Regan's mum. She's a fiercely devoted, complex woman trying to save her daughter while grappling with her own disbelief. And Father Karras. He's not your typical heroic priest. He's battling his faith, haunted by guilt over his mother's death and questioning whether he's up to the task. These internal struggles make the characters relatable, even in the middle of such an extraordinary story. It's terrifying but thought-provoking. This isn't a jump-scare kind of horror. Blatty builds the fear gradually, layering it with themes of good versus evil, faith versus doubt, and science versus the supernatural. You can't help but wonder, what would you believe if you were in Chris's shoes? The blend of realism and supernatural. Blatty dives deep into medical and psychiatric explanations for Regan's behavior before introducing the demonic possession angle. It's like he's daring you to believe, or at least question your disbelief. And when the supernatural elements hit, they feel earned. It explores big questions. At its heart, this is a story about humanity's struggle with the unknown. How do we hold on to faith when faced with unspeakable darkness? How do we reconcile science and spirituality? These questions linger long after you've closed the book. Why you should read it. If you love horror that's more than just creepy moments, The Exorcist is for you. It's a haunting tale that explores the human condition in the face of unimaginable evil. Plus, the writing is fantastic. Blatty knows exactly how to pull you in, freak you out, and leave you pondering life's biggest questions. So, whether you're a fan of psychological horror, supernatural thrillers, or just love a great story, give The Exorcist a try. But fair warning, this one stays with you. Don't be surprised if you find yourself double-checking the locks or leaving the lights on after reading it.
Wrap-up time. Wow, what a journey we've been on, diving into the darkest corners of horror literature. After exploring all these spine-chilling classics, I've come to a big conclusion. The scariest horror novel of all time has to be The Fisherman by John Langan. Now hear me out. This book is next-level terrifying. It's a slow burn, sure, but the atmosphere? Absolutely suffocating in the best way. Langan weaves together folk horror, cosmic terror, and this eerie fishing community vibe, with mythology and ancient deities creeping in to mess with your head. It's unsettling, it's hypnotic, and honestly, it'll make you rethink late-night fishing trips forever. What really gets me about The Fisherman is how it taps into those deep, primal fears. Fear of the unknown, fear of the unknowable, and the existential dread of realizing we're just tiny, insignificant specks in a vast, uncaring universe. Fun stuff, right? But it's not just about that cosmic creepiness. The story also dives into the horrors within us. It's layered, it's beautiful, and it's absolutely haunting. So, why do I think this is the scariest horror novel ever? Because it gets under your skin. It's not just about jump scares or gore. It's about that creeping dread that sticks with you, the kind that makes you double-check the shadows and maybe keep a light on for a week. But hey, that's just my take. What do you think? Do you have a read that's even scarier? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Seriously, I'm always looking for my next nightmare-inducing book. And if you're new here, welcome to the SmartBookWorms family. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We've got tons of bookish content coming your way. Horror reviews, author spotlights, and so much more. All right, that's it from me. Thanks for joining me and the rest of the SmartBookWorms team on this wild horror-lit adventure. Keep reading, keep growing, and I'll see you next time on Deep Dive with SmartBookWorms.